Sega.
Sega Manx TT SuperBike.
Manx TT SuperBike, or Sega Manx TT SuperBike as the title screen shouts, was the next major arcade racing game from Sega, following Daytona USA and Sega Rally Championship. After those two car-based games, Sega decided to return to motorcycle racing, and what better event to pick than arguably the most famous motorcycle event in the world. First, we'll look at the arcade version running on Sega's Model 2A CRX hardware from 1995. This I'll emulate using the Sega Model 2 emulator. Then we'll compare it to the 1997 PC version to see how it fares in comparison. The arcade game was programmed by Sega AM R&D departments 3 and 4. AM3 previously made Sega Rally Championship, whilst AM4 would evolve into Ryu Gakutoku Studios responsible for the Yakuza and Like a Dragon series. The arcade game released in a couple of cabinets, the deluxe unit shown on the right and the twin cabinet shown on the left. It was also networkable, and the top left image shows a full 8-player version running on the back of a converted truck trailer at the 1995 Amusement Machine Show. The reproduction map in the middle shows how real locations from the real-life event were squished into the arcade version, and I do mean squished. The original Isle of Man TT circuit is around 37 miles long and takes around 18 minutes to do a lap, where Sega wanted some arcade tracks that only take a minute or so per lap. So whilst Manx TT SuperBike has the Isle of Man flavour, it's not at all accurate. The arcade begins with the title screen.
Sega Manx TT SuperBike.
Here I'm emulating the twin unit, then this rolling demo. You don't know. What waits beyond that turn? You know nothing. Beyond that, speed. The machine wants to play. To cross the fine line between now and never. Are you ready? Yeah, it's a bit cheesy.
Welcome to the exciting world of TT racing.
After the credits, there's a rolling demo showing off the TT course and the leaderboard of the fastest riders, and some Honda credits. A second rolling demo shows the Laxey Coast Extra Stage. This isn't a real-life racing event, but only having one track might have limited the arcade game slightly. And that's it for the arcade intro. Let's start a race on the Laxey Coast stage. If you hold the brake down, you can do a real-life accurate time trial event, but we'll go for the racing event instead, where you have to try to beat 8 rivals. I'll use automatic transmission for simplicity. Laxey Coast is a bit more of a simple track with wide banked corners. We'll do the first lap from behind the bike and the second from the tilting on-bike view. This track starts alongside the water before turning inland. It also shares the moorland stretch from the main TT course, but is otherwise unique. There are lots of real-life scenery items around the track, like the Manx Electric Railway, the Laxey Wheel and Lighthouse. Towns are represented as a handful of houses though, which is rather amusing compared to the real event. The famous Craignabar pub is also present, although it's on the side of a hill on the left here, where in real life it's at the end of a straight. And after 2 laps, it's all over, and we've won. A sheep appears on the winning screen. We'll get back to sheep later. A rolling credit sequence then plays out, where you can watch your ride, much like the end of Sega Rally Championship. You can then enter your name in this rather fancy In the Clouds screen. And I'm top. Yay! Let's move on to the TT course. The start of this track is pretty accurate to real life as you dive down Bray Hill in the city of Douglas. It's probably the most well-known part of the course. You soon pass a church, which will be familiar to anyone who's played a more accurate Isle of Man game, before winding through the countryside. You blast through a village, some more countryside, and soon fly over the Ballow Bridge. The track then curves through Ramsey onto the moorland. This part is narrow and fast in real life, but here is something like Daytona USA with huge wide banked turns. Racing on bike is a bit more stressful here. I'm actually using a steering wheel set to 180 degrees to play, and it's still very sensitive. Anyway, eventually we clatter through the last 2 turns and make it in last place. Less yay. At least I'm still the fastest overall. And that's pretty much all the arcade has, apart from a wacky cheat mode. If you input a code on the transmission select screen, all the bikes become sheep, and this hilarious tune plays. There are comedy boing sound effects if you collide with anything or jump in the air, but these animals are fast. It's a nod to the home ports of Daytona USA, allowing you to ride a horse, apparently. And the sheep wins. For some reason the rider vanishes though, so here are a bunch of people cheering some sheep. The name entry screen has a different tune too. The only other things to show in the arcade are that the deluxe edition has this startup screen and some instructions on how to tilt the bike.
About the active motion slider system. To turn bike, shift body weight from side to side. When riding, please place feet on step.
Oh, and one other little feature. If you forget to start racing, your rider starts counting sheep, as they must be asleep. This game has a sheep obsession, I tell you. Anyway, here's a minute of the arcade version without me talking over it. The PC version arrived in 1997. Sega decided to outsource this one with the development handled by Perfect Entertainment, a UK and Australian company, with publishing handled by Psygnosis, which meant the PC version begins with a dark, psychedelic Psygnosis logo. The title screen has a new voice. I'm pretty sure this was revoiced in Australia.
Sega Manx TT SuperBike.
Compare this to the arcade original.
Sega Manx TT SuperBike.
A video then plays. It's a bit grubby looking, as I think the Castrol Honda Superbikes are track bikes, so they messed around with the background to make it more Isle of Man style. After another title screen, and the credits, we get a rolling intro sequence. This is from the Glide 3D Effects accelerated version of the game, which I'm showing here. A second video follows which shows some Sega branded bikes and a bit more of the Isle of Man race, but again it's so overly effects laden it's hard to watch. You then get a rolling demo of the reverse mirrored Laxey Coast stage, part of the PC mode of the game. This has gloomy grey clouds, which is very UK weather. A third demo later on shows Laxey Coast in sunnier weather. The game can also be played without a 3D effects card, with the direct draw version looking like this. It's a bit more flickery, but texture quality is equivalent to the 3D effects version overall. The one big difference is the background though. If you look at Laxey Coast, the background is now a flat image that moves left and right. Compare this to the 3D effects version and it's now a proper 3D background, which does make the distant scenery appear a bit differently. If you look at the start of the TT course using 3D effects, it's pretty similar to the arcade with hardly much distant scenery visible on the drop down Bray Hill. But switch to the direct draw version and there's now a whacking great background which makes the drop down the hill feel totally different. Anyway, we'll cover the 3D effects version in this video, although I will include the direct draw version in the screenshot pixel level comparison later on. The PC version has a lot more options than the arcade, including an unlockable Superbike mode, and some extra bikes available should you win the previous challenge mode, or input a command line string to unlock them as I did here. But let's get back to the arcade version and race the Laxey Coast stage. First impressions are good, this feels very arcade accurate, but there is reduced detail everywhere, from missing scenery items such as the Manx electric railway train, and much more simplified road markings throughout the course. Stick around for the head-to-head comparison later on to play Spot the Difference more easily. Otherwise, it's a solid recreation. The handling is just as twitchy though. I'm using an Xbox 360 controller here. Occasionally rival riders will fall off their bikes. I didn't see that in the arcade original, but they seem to be able to catch you up again as arcade rubber band physics are in full effect here. The PC version has 3 laps by default, whereas the arcade only had 2. The arcade can be extended to 3 or more laps though, if you wish. And I just managed to take first place on the line. The crowd are much less animated here and look less Japanese, whilst the name entry screen is pretty bland compared to the arcade's cloud-style area. Over to the TT course then, and it's largely the same story, simplified 3D models and road markings, but generally the same feel as the arcade version. Again, the twitchy handling is in full effect. And the passing the checkpoint voiceover is now rather Australian in nature instead of Japanese sounding.
Passing the checkpoint!
Much like the arcade version, I still clatter into a lot of scenery using the on-bike view, and eventually come in third with the same lifeless crowd and dull high score screen. One thing I noticed less of was sheep in this version. Luckily, the hidden sheep racing mode is present and correct, though the sheep are a bit more grey here and tend to blend into the road. The comedy sound effects are still in full effect.
Passing the checkpoint!
Eventually I finish in first place, and my rider becomes semi-transparent for some reason. The PC version also has a full multi-race challenge mode. Winning it unlocks the Superbikes mode. Let's try out the Superbikes mode with the Castrol Honda bike. The first race is around Laxey Coast. These bonus bikes are pretty darn quick. I finish in third. Race 2 is the TT course. Bombing down the hill is pretty exciting on these bikes. You can tell I'm on a thumbstick though with my rapid bike movements. Eventually I finish this race again in third place. Next up is Laxey Coast, reversed and mirrored. On the Sega Saturn this track was run with a sunset background, but here it's a grey, rainy looking day. Pretty accurate for UK weather though. This one I finish in second place. Finally it's the TT course, reversed and mirrored, and again it's under grey skies, which the Saturn version also had. And at the end I finish third. Apparently I'm the new Isle of Man champion despite not winning anything. So you get rewarded with some real life footage showing locations from the real life event that appear in the game. Annoyingly the CD music overlaps the video initially. Note that it's a Sega sponsored bike, which is nice. Here's some of the moorland section, and here's the tight corners past the church. After the video you get to see a rolling demo with full credits for the Sega and Perfect Entertainment teams behind the game, along with thanks to Duke Video for supplying the real life footage. And that's it. 2 tracks with variants and a range of bikes. It's a bit skinny for a home conversion. Anyway, here's a minute of the PC version in action. Let's compare a couple of shots of the arcade version to the PC 3DFX Glide accelerated version and the regular direct draw version. Here's the arcade version on the Laxey Coast start line. By default the arcade rider wears red, but I swapped it for blue so it matched the home port more closely. The arcade version is particularly low resolution, running at just 496 by 384 pixels. It actually looks slightly more detailed here than on the real machine, as I'm not using trilinear filtering on the emulator as it messes up some of the graphics. On the arcade the road in the distance will be more blurry. Note here the range of building colours on the left, and white line to start the race. Also see how much of the distant green hill is visible. Wiping across to the PC 3DFX Glide version, you can see it's slightly higher resolution, but models and details are cut back. We now have a start banner instead of a white line, and the buildings on the left are much less varied. However, you can see more of the distant green hill. Now, wiping to the PC standard direct draw version, you can see how the flat background loses the clouds and how much of the textures are much more wobbly looking. On the plus side, texture quality is an exact match. Next, here's the start of the TT course on the arcade. Look at the detail on the pit building on the left, the gantries in the pit lane, the detail and type of spectator models shown, the detail on trees in the distance, and the scoreboard on the right being black at the top. Wiping to the PC 3D effects version, you can see the pit building and most textures are less detailed. There are no pit lane gantries, the spectators look quite different, the trees are less detailed, and the scoreboard is now all white. On the plus side, once again you can see a little bit further into the distance on the PC version. Finally, wiping to the direct draw version shows how different the background is, plus the building textures are more warped inwards. The trees, however, look a little more gritty here, a bit more like the arcade version. Let's put both versions head to head around each track, and also compare the sheep, obviously. Manx TT SuperBike is great as an arcade game, a hop-on, hop-off racing experience with a tilting bike as a controller. It's a fun way to spend a few minutes. However, the home port is a bit narrow. It's one thing to be almost arcade perfect, but when that arcade lasts about 5 to 6 minutes total for both tracks, I can imagine people feeling a bit shortchanged. It's a shame the developers didn't add time of day or a variety of weather types to shake things up a little. The challenge and Superbike mode are okay, but it's all very much of a muchness. And if you didn't know about the hidden sheep amusement, then you could have missed out on that altogether. Overall, the home port has a little more content than the arcade, but the arcade looks better, so it's a hard call between which is best. I'll leave that up to you to decide. If you like this comparison of Manx TT SuperBike, then give it a like, or subscribe, ring the bell, etc. to be informed when I've uploaded something new. And join me next time for some large robots blowing each other up.